podcast. I'm Superintendent Regan Nickels, and I'm so glad you're listening. This season, we're leaning into meaningful conversations, the kinds that help us think deeply about what's next for our students and our community. In our last episode, I talked about the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, a book that's sparking a lot of important dialogue about how growing up has changed in the age of smartphones and social media. Today, I'm excited to be joined by a parent who's been reading and discussing this book with her book club. Allison, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go ahead and get started. And can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So I am a mom of two little boys, one 5 years old and one's almost 2. I work full-time at Thomas Building Center, and I also volunteer on the Sequim Education Foundation Board, as well as the North Peninsula Building Association Board. I'm starting to volunteer a little bit with the elementary PTA, and a few months ago, we decided to start a book club.
Well, you're a busy lady, that's for sure. So thanks for having the time for us today. So I really love that your book club chose to dive into The Anxious Generation. What got your group interested in reading it, and what were some of your first impressions?
So we didn't have a book club before, but the book Anxious Generation kept coming up in topic amongst me and some of my friends. And after, I don't know, the third or fourth one, I said, why don't we just start a book club? And so we gathered a couple of ladies, there's 6 of us, and we started our book club with The Anxious Generation, which is not your typical book club book, but it was very intriguing. I think it was a good stepping stone for the moms.
That's fantastic. It certainly wasn't a beach read,
No.
but you dove right in. So, as both a reader and a parent, what implications did this book have for you personally? And when you started thinking about your own children and their experiences growing up in this digital age, what did you find your mind going toward?
Okay, as I was reading through this book, I found a lot of things very unsettling. There's so much uncertainty online these days that it's hard to know what's genuine anymore or what's real. And that can be truly frightening, especially with your children. As a mother, it's always my instinct to shield my child from harm. So as I was reading through this book, I kept thinking of the author and him saying, kids are missing out on that cognitive brain um, growth because they aren't out taking risks or taking chances, and they're not able to learn that, and then they aren't going to apply it later in life. I definitely recognized a part of myself while reading that, because I think every time my son says, I'm going to go do this or I want to do this, I always say, be careful. It's just the first thing out of my mind, out of my mouth. I just want him to be careful, not knowing that subconsciously I could be putting fear into him. And as he grows older, he might remember that and say, oh, I never did this because my mom always told me, be careful and don't do that or watch what you're doing. And I would never want him to grow up and not take risks or miss out on experiences because of my comments. Reading this book definitely assures me that I don't want my kids to be introduced or addicted to social media too soon. I didn't have a cell phone until I was 16 and could afford it on my own. I feel like kids don't have to deal with that these days, and I know it's not common, but I see some truth in holding out as long as possible, and I hope to do that with my sons.
Well, after reading this book, were there ideas that stood out to you, things that made you think differently about what schools and families could do together? And what would you like the district to be thoughtful about as we look ahead?
Yes, so as I was reading this book, I sent a text to our book club, and I said, this book is inspiring me to change the world. I found so many ideas going through my mind about, how we could help and get kids involved in different activities that kids could do. I tell people all the time that we need to bring life back to the basics. We need to slow down and be present with our children. Um, as you grow up, everyone who's older than you tells you that time is a thief and time goes by so fast and you're going to miss out on things. And watching my kids grow up in front of me makes me realize just how important it is to spend time with your children as much as you can. I personally would love for the district to implement some more hands on learning, exploration, sensory, things that we can start with them really young and get them interested in stuff. I feel like maybe they don't have the means at home to experiment with things. And, you know, maybe little boys don't have a role model where they can bang a hammer and learn how to build something. But if we can provide that in a school, you might be, showing some interest for a little kid with a future career path that they would have no idea that they were even interested in. I feel like society today's rushing kids to grow up, and I feel like it's our responsibility as parents and mentors, role models, the district to preserve that time and really just let them play.
Really great points there. And, our school district has certainly recognized that learning hands on has amazing benefits. And our start of the industrial arts classes at the middle school are a great tribute to that because they've been very successful and popular with students. So thank you for bringing that up. Speaking of time and making sure we are considering when things happen, one of the author's more talked about ideas is this concept of waiting, delaying access to phones or to social media until students are a little older. In your conversations, how realistic did that idea feel?
I think it's very realistic within your means. I personally have seen, witnessed, done. Um, Social media and digital has started as a go to for parents, just to give them an extra 5 minutes of quiet. Or if you have to have an adult conversation and you don't want to be interrupted, it's like, okay, go watch Bluey for 20 minutes and we can, get this done or do laundry. Um, I think that it's very addicting, and we as parents may not see it or understand it, but in the long run, it's affecting our kids a lot more than we realize. I personally hope I can postpone my kids' access to phones or social media for as long as I can. Yeah, so I feel like life is changing and I may not have control over that for as long as I hope, but my hopes are to wait as long as possible.
So, author Jonathan Haidt talks about tension that there is because as you talk about how the phones have been utilized for different reasons by parents to manage their child's time. He also talks about what he calls the radius of safety. And in the 70s and 80s, students were often encouraged to go play and explore freely and to roam the neighborhood. But since the 90s and 2000s, that radius has gotten smaller and smaller. And so I'm interested in what strikes you about this idea in tension to uh, having social media to give to children or a device for games or movies.
Yeah. So growing up, my brother and I played outside all the time. In the summertime, my parents both worked. So it was make sure you get your chores done and then be home by dinner. And we would be outside in the yard or walking down to the river, or we would go uptown every once in a while and roam the streets. We didn't have cell phones back then, and we just made sure we were always back by dinner. Um, and I think we did just fine. We never got in trouble. We didn't cause any issues. We never went out of our comfort zone or do things we knew we were going to get in trouble for. But these days, I think that social media has made us aware of all the bad in the world. I feel like in the 70s and 80s, you still had the bad, but you probably didn't hear about it in the next city or town or state or really like country over. Um, I feel like news now spreads so fast and everyone is entitled to their opinions. But um, I think because of that, parents are more scared. They don't know, someone walking down the street, if that person could be troubled or cause harm. And I feel like as a parent, you're just always protective. So um, I today would never let my middle schooler walk uptown with a group of friends unaccompanied. But I notice that extreme and I'll let my kids like play out in the yard by themselves without hovering. And I feel like that's a win.
There is a real challenge for parenting these days because we do have the need to have time to do things as adults. And we also want our children to grow in that risk taking and having confidence being built. But we also have this massive responsibility around safety. And also, I would also say judgment, when
Yes.
you have your children allowed to maybe push the boundaries a bit or a bit more than friends or family might think is reasonable, that also can cause attention. So I can see how the use of devices has become very usual in the
Yes.
course of raising kids.
I also feel like because of social media, um, every day people are scrolling and they're seeing, you know, Bob just got a new boat, or look at they just got their daughter a brand new car. And um, I feel like it puts pressure on you as a parent and especially as a kid, if you can't afford it yourself and your parents aren't within those means or able to get it for you, then it's like you're almost looked down upon. The pressure is just too much, I think, for teenagers.
There's a lot of talk about social media and its setting of unattainable standards for both boys and girls. And as you're saying, for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think us talking more about it is really important, and its effect on parenting is a critical discussion. Allison, I really thank you so much for joining me and sharing your perspectives on this. And thank you to your book club for leaning into this important conversation. For our listeners, if you're curious about the anxious generation or this topic in general, I invite you to join us for our upcoming community forum, Cell Phones and Students. Let's talk about it. The forum will be held tomorrow on Tuesday, November 4th at 6:30 p.m. in the Sequim High School Library. It's designed especially for families with students in grades 6 through 12, and it's a chance to listen, ask questions, and explore how we can support our students in navigating technology in healthy and balanced ways. Thank you for tuning in to the Storytellers podcast. I hope you will join the conversation both at the forum and in your own homes as we continue learning together.